Now, I was doing some of the math in my head and I just realized that it's been 28 years since we've gotten a good Terminator movie. That's a long time. This is before the internet, before Netflix, before cell phones. I mean, Blockbuster Video was around and people probably didn't hate Trump as much as they do now. And with that, I'm welcome to another episode of The Romantic Room. My goal, as always, is to enhance the movie watching experience. So Terminator Dark Fate, of course, yet another attempt to revive a franchise, which I adore. I love the very first Terminator. I adore the second Terminator. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, one of the best sci-fi action movies ever made, and it still holds up even now, 28 years later from its release. And I was glad to see Tim Miller, trying to take the reins behind the camera to see what he can do. He gave us Deadpool a couple years ago, so I was glad to see him try to take a crack at this. And, I was really cautiously optimistic overall. One of the, we've seen so many of these movies over and over again, beyond the second one, just not succeed. And really, there hasn't been a good sequel to the second Terminator at all. And I'm always hopeful that this next one's going to be it. This is the one that's going to bring it back to glory, so to speak. Now, what's interesting to me about this franchise is I've always equated to, kind of that tumultuous relationship. This is the cinematic equivalent of a bad relationship. We've all had those kind of relationships where, obviously at first it's all great. You meet somebody, you fall in love, whatever the case is. It's all blue skies and roses. Nothing can go wrong. Inevitably, things go bad. You break up. Maybe you meet this person down the road, down the line, and you figured, let's give it another try. Let's see if we can recapture what we had. And it ends badly again, and you meet him again in a couple of years, and you say to yourself, I'm older, I'm wiser, and we're in a better place now. Just give it another shot. Boom, things go bad again, and so forth and so forth. It's exactly how this franchise has become over the last few years, particularly with the last 3 sequels, which have been subpar, and I'm being nice with that. So now here we are again, years later, the new Terminator movie comes out. It's like, again, you see the girl one last time. Okay, and every time you're hopeful that you can capture what you had in the beginning, and you're so stubborn about it because how you feel with the franchise. I mean, you're still in love with this person and you can't help yourself. And I'll say this at this time, that they got things right for the most part. This relationship, although you're never going to recapture what you had early, it brings good closure. And you finally end on good terms, and you're glad it's ended. But at least it ended in a point where you're satisfied with what happened. You realize you're never gonna capture that magic, and it's exactly what happened in this movie. This was a movie which I enjoyed. It's very entertaining. It's not gonna, hit the high notes what the Terminators did, and at this point you gotta realize it's never gonna happen. But at least I left satisfied knowing, like, okay, we finally, 28 years later, got a decent and well-made entry into this franchise beyond the second one. Now, Tim Miller does a really good job here. I thought his direction is really good. The action is the star of the movie for the most part. It's really well done. Some great action set pieces here. A little CGI heavy, but that's okay. It's to be expected in these days, but it's really well done. Particularly, the first, I think, 30 minutes are great. It's a great setup initially, but begin with the first few minutes of the film, and I like how Tim Miller introduces back into this world of where we left off from Terminator 2. And this movie retcons all the other sequels. This is basically considered to be the true sequel to Terminator 2, and it puts you right, towards the end of that, I guess, the franchise, how it left off. It picks up a few years beyond that, and it really does a good job of setting up Sarah Connor's character and what she will be about in this film, which I thought was really well done. And speaking of which, she's great. I love the additions of, bringing back Linda Hamilton. She's great in the role. She's a badass. She's one of the best female characters we've seen in cinema, and there's nothing different here. Bringing back Arnold and how he was introduced and who he is, and it's hard to talk about because I don't want to spoil anything. He had a really good introduction. He had a really good purpose in this film. They didn't bring back Arnold for the sake of bringing back Arnold because of his strong ties to the franchise. He actually has a lot of weight here, and for the most part, it worked fairly well. And I know this movie's been compared a lot, and you hear this to like Force Awakens, and I agree. This is a good mix of the old and new. We got Linda Hamilton, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and we got good additions. Mackenzie Davis is great. Gabriel Luna, he's fantastic as the Terminator. He's really cool. I like him a lot. Natalia Reyes, one of my Colombian heritage like myself, so it's good to see a Colombian being represented in the big screen, in a big action blockbuster film, so kudos to her. They're all good. They're really, really good, and that really works out well. But much like The Force Awakens, my biggest complaint about the movie is that, yes, the action's great, the characters are cool, and the great performances, they kick a lot of ass. The women here kick a lot of ass, no doubt about it, and Arnold does as well. But the story itself is okay. You know, although it's well directed, it's not a great written film here because it relies heavily on what we've seen before. It doesn't give anything new a la Force Awakens. And then I really understand that comparison where it played it safe. It gave us a good mix old and new. It was a lot of familiar beats we've seen before in that franchise, and this kind of does the same thing. And you kind of want to see something more in terms of the story, where it's an okay Terminator story, you know, wrapped up in a nice, good, entertaining action film. And in essence, the issues with the story were a couple of things were, I'll keep it spoiler free, where they could have explored more in terms of setting up how the future is currently. They kind of breezed through that really quick. Some things about Arnold's character didn't quite fit right with me. You know, but all in all, it was fine for the most part. It wasn't terrible, but again, it's just very familiar. We've seen, you know, these Terminators and this liquid metal kind of Terminators. We've seen that before. We know this story about, you know, we have someone being sent back in the past to protect Natalia Reyes' character. We get that. We've seen that before. This character is obviously important to the future and she needs to be protected. We've seen this with John Connor. It's just nothing new. It's retreading old material. And it's fine, I guess. And from that standpoint, it's okay. It's still well executed for the most part. But I wanted to see a little bit more out of this movie. But as an action film, it rocks. It's great. You know, a lot of good. You're going to be entertained by that alone. And overall, because of that, you're going to be entertained. This is an entertaining film. I'm still recommending this movie. You guys go watch it. Just, you know, curb the expectations. Although, yes, it's the best sequel since the second one. It doesn't come close to reaching those heights. And at this point, it never will. Let this be the last one. I'm happy how things ended here. They kind of gave us a good send-off by giving us something satisfactory in terms of this franchise. And now just leave it alone. Let's move on. Hey, I realize now I ended this relationship well, but I need to move on and find someone else. And that being said, you guys should do the same after you've seen this movie. There's other stuff out there for you, believe me. Plenty of fish in the sea, as they say. All that being said, if you guys check it out, let me know what you guys thought. Comment below. And of course, if you haven't done so already, subscribe below and feed money to go to the movies and talk about it afterwards. See you guys next time.